Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Around the Table with the AOTR. I'm Sai Marie Johnson, joined by my co host Beverly L. Anderson, and today we are venturing into the shadowed rooms of the human experience. We are joined by the prolific J.S. Nathaniel, a writer who makes the unfamiliar feel like home.
That's right, Sai. JS, your work from Dominion of the Divine and to your latest sketches refuses to stay in one lane. You've said before that you invite readers into spaces that feel both familiar and entirely new. So let's dive right in.
Okay. Well, thanks. Sorry. Thanks for having me on the show, you guys. It's great to finally meet and speak with you guys. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So, starting there, what exactly is the core creative philosophy behind your work, and why has genre blending become the foundation of your storytelling?
Well, I think what's really important is, my early childhood fascinations are part DNA and part lived experiences. So I think that's kind of the core of what my writing is. Um, I don't really choose the characters; the characters choose me. My stories are character driven, and they visit me, and I tell their story faithfully as it comes to me. So that's sort of where my process comes from. So,
That's really an awesome way to do things. So on the heels of that, I find it fascinating how you pull from different worlds. So many of us have childhood blueprints. So, how do these early childhood fascinations with the strange influence the specific worlds you build today?
well, I didn't have a quote unquote normal upbringing. I've had an extraordinary life, but it's also been very devastating. And I don't believe that I'm alone. I think a lot of readers and a lot of us can relate to that. That really is that core, that DNA, that lived experience. And I think that always will come through in those stories. We kind of live in a time where um, globally things are not okay. And we're expected to live in this world as though everything's quote unquote normal. And we're just sort of just going to work and we're clocking in and we're just pretending that these things don't exist. And I think uh, that is where, I will always tell the story faithfully as I receive it. It's sort of like the best way I can explain it is we all have had a moment where we get a song stuck in our head. That's how characters come to me. It's almost like a radio station. They come to me, some visit me for maybe 20 minutes, some stay for weeks, and I'm haunted and I have to get these stories out. And so I really, for me, of course, there's some maybe psychological underlining there where I am weaving those lived experiences. I am sort of working with the character, hearing their dialogue and things like that. So yeah, I just it will always be from that kind of a perspective uh, as I tell the story. So
So, you often touch on dystopian, gothic, crime, and realism. How do these four pillars show up when your characters hit a moment of conflict?
we've all been through conflict, and I think these characters are very human. I certainly feel that they are human. So when they hit these conflicts, we're all sort of there's moments in everyone's life where we fail to act, and I think that's a lot in my stories where you want these characters to act in a sort of a reasonable way in a really horrific kind of circumstance, and we kind of expect people to be completely civilized, and that they approach things and step outside this sort of chaos and say, okay, well, you should approach it this way, or you should say it this way. And my characters are human. I mean, they're essentially flawed characters themselves, sort of dealing with an extraordinary event, and they're not going to handle it perfectly. They're going to handle it just like all of us would. Not where I think everybody's not at their best moments in crisis, and so yeah, that's how the story kind of plays out. Is they're deeply, I wouldn't say flawed. I don't really like to say flawed, but I would say deeply human. I guess is the best way to say it.
All right, so you've used the phrase locked in a dance. Why do so many of your characters find themselves struggling with shadowed pasts or literal storage unit secrets?
Well, it's sort of about, again, I'll go back to, lived experiences. I had a very difficult upbringing. And so, I'm very familiar with that. Everyday people, working class people, and those struggles and, the things that society weaves in between those moments. So yeah, I pull from that for sure. The characters that when they visit me, I don't always have, they're when the messages come in, I don't sometimes it doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I sit there and I think about, the story and how, which way is the right way to respond and things like that. So it's one of those things where I'll always go back. I'm always going to tell the truth of the story and the heart of it and my lived experiences and stuff like that. So it will always be there. I think it will follow my work forever. I don't think that it'll always be a reoccurring thing. So
So, for an aspiring writer who feels stuck in a safe style, what is the first step to moving toward those lyrical edges that you're known for?
well, I think I think society has sort of trained us to um, not be expressive and not own our voice. And so I believe it already exists. I think if a writer is looking, I think we all have a lyrical prose in us. I think we all have poetry within us. I think it's just about allowing us, giving yourself permission to tap into that. We all have a voice, and that's what readers fall in love with. It's not about the technical aspects of writing, in my opinion. It's about tapping into that voice that you have, the way only you could tell the story. And so, you know, readers, you can't fool readers because if you try to um, sort of create some sort of an artificial style, or your voice is not really your voice, readers will understand that. You know I hope when people read my work, they really feel these characters, they really want the characters to survive, or they want the character to die, or that they really are immersed in the story. So I think that every writer has that poetic prose in them. I think they have that poetry. I think they just have to embrace their voice. And that's the most powerful thing any writer can do, is really be vulnerable and be authentic in the voice that is truly you. And that's what readers really respond well to, and we all do. We all respond to that human connection and that authenticity and that vulnerability, because we've all been there at one point in our lives, I would think, most people.
Well, speaking of the reader, so let's talk about them. How
Okay.
does how does the tension in a Gothic narrative impact the reader's physical nervous system?
Well, I think like Gothic stories, you have the Gothic story on the outside, but it's really our world that we're living in. And I kind of touched on it earlier that um, we sort of live in this horrific kind of um, environment that, in the world. Telling a story with a Gothic theme is really our world. That's what we're living right now. And it sort of allows the reader to be uncomfortable, to be in those uncomfortable spaces, because it is Gothic, it is strange, it is bizarre, it's oddity, and that's sort of what our world is right now, and so it allows the reader to step into that world. Essentially, they're stepping into the real world, I guess, is the best way I can describe that.
Coming off the heels of that, we're halfway through 2026. How do current societal shifts intensify the themes of isolation in your newest work?
I mean, without question, it would be, the pandemic. That's where everything spontaneous in the land of doll parts came from, was that real lived experience in isolation when, the world locked their doors, drew the blinds, and just waited this pandemic out. And I think, yes, it was lived experiences, but I think the dystopian world is fascinating to all of us because it's always there. It sort of bleeds in to our lives as we live. So,
Well, here's the next question I have for you. In your stories, can two characters with conflicting moralities build a secure relationship, or is individual healing a prerequisite?
well, yeah, I mean, yes, I believe that both could be true. I think, first of all, we've all been in this situation where, we do have to be vulnerable and work with people that we may not want to work with in life to overcome some sort of obstacle. That's number one. But we're also have the demons that we're working with too in our life. So we're not always going to approach that in in the right way. So, yeah, I think both can be true at the same time.
So, what is the difference between writing about trauma in traditional fiction and the subconscious exploration that you do?
Well, I think they're all the same. I think the subconscious part is allowing the trauma to breathe, sort of letting it out of the bottle. Um, I think when we are, faced with trauma, there's a lot of shame that goes with it and guilt. And I think this subconscious just allowing those emotions and being vulnerable and telling that story and letting it out in the best way you can in your voice where it's not being micromanaged or in that kind of a realm, I think is really powerful. I think allowing those traumas to surface is a good way towards a point of healing and sort of surviving that trauma, I guess.
All right, so you have mentioned subway reveries. How can storytellers use these mundane moments to break generational tropes?
Well, I think all writers in general, I think it's really important to really be in the world and sort of not of the world. I love people in general. I'm a really huge on being a people person. And I think that's really important as a writer. And these subway reveries are sort of me being with people from all walks of life and sort of feeling those moments. I've been on the train at night, I've been on the train during the day, just different hours, and you get all kinds of people coming and going. And I think that human experience, it's sort of that micro system of humanity. It's like you really are able to sort of tap in to who we are as people, as humans, whether it's good or bad, or you don't know how to feel. I mean, I've in Denver, Colorado, there's light rail, and there's been plenty of times I've taken the train, around 12 or 1 in the morning. And I was working late. And so the train was just the easiest way to get back and forth to home because it was faster than driving. And there were people that would, you know, uh, they would take drugs on the train, and you would see that go on. And there was just all kinds of things. And I felt like I never felt more human in that moment than I ever had. Just having sort of strangers walking in and out of the train, and they're living their lives, I'm living my lives, and we're co-living our lives together in different ways and different perspectives. So I think that's a powerful thing for writers. I think to really embrace us as humans and really be connected helps you tell a human story. I think just the way literature is sort of going as we're really trying to branch out away from being human and the imperfections of what writing is. Um, I've seen a lot of things on social media where, I see people offer up their work, and immediately, is it perfect? I mean, I don't think anybody writes perfectly. I'm always going to root for somebody who puts their heart out and really tells the story or whatever they want to share in their vulnerable state, wherever they're at. I'm always going to celebrate that. But we often try to tear those things down because it's not perfect, it's not edited. And so, yeah, I think human storytelling is probably the oldest art form there has been besides painting. And I think we are really, as a society, trying to move into this world of a robotic response and robotic emotions. And, um, you know, I think that human experience will always win, no matter what. So
So, what is the biggest misconception about dystopian fiction today?
I don't, I don't think there's really, personally, I think we can relate to dystopian stories because essentially, sad to say, we live in a dystopian world, and I mean around the world, not just centered in any country. I think we all understand that and we can relate to that, and I think maybe for me, dystopian is a way to try to figure out a way not to live or to change that dystopian reality in a way. I think just like in everything spontaneous in Land of Doll Parts, the end, the end wasn't going to be a happy ending. But she read the story and she said, I really feel strongly that you should um, leave with something that is something to root for. And she was right. Sort of in the Hunger Games where they say, I can't remember who said it, but they said, I think they told Katniss that try to live a victor's life. And um, I think that's how the story ends, is that they weren't victorious in the sense that they had suffered a lot of great losses. A lot of horrific things happened to the two people at the end. But also, um, there was a new way of there was a new rebirth of sort of the world, or the people that were left into it, and I think that was a hopeful thing. And I'm always going to end on love, because they were finally together and they were in love, and the world was sort of righted in a time that was really horrific, I guess. So yeah, I think we sort of are, we can relate to it because we do live in a dystopian type of world as we speak. So
So, one of the recurring themes is radical honesty for you. What
mhm.
is, why is it so pivotal to your character's development?
Well, it's sort of, I like what I had said before. I think radical honesty is that we're not perfect, and humans are not supposed to be perfect. And so, um, and as our society moves to the perfection of art, because even art is, we decide what's perfect and what's not perfect, and what is art and what is not. So I think, that brutal honesty is saying, welcome, because when you read my stories, it's a very human story, and they're very human characters. They're certainly real to me. Um, when something happens to my characters, I'm crying or I'm upset, and it's happening as I'm writing it. And so I guess for me, that I'm always going to tell the absolute most truthful part of the story as it came to me, and as I'm able to write it down. I'm always going to write those in my in my books. I've had an editor for Stardust Angel. My editor and I argued. We had to have a personal phone call, because he just said, "You can't write it this way." He just said, "I don't care." He had a master's in creative writing, and he just said, "I don't care. The story's great. You're writing." We talked about it. He really loves my style of writing, and he says that I'm talented and stuff. But we had a sort of knockout, kind of drag out fight about how to write things. And so, um, in the end, we both kind of compromised. But my whole point was not that I thought I was right. My whole point of the argument was that if I changed certain elements of the book, it wouldn't be true. And so when readers read my work, I want them to know that all of those things are as they were given to me, and I passed them to the reader. We may not like, I don't like every book that I read. I love literature. I read so much. I love it. But I don't when I don't connect with a story, I don't think that the writer's a terrible writer, or the book should have never been made, or I don't say any of that. I just say, I don't connect. Those words weren't meant for me. I sort of believe that. I believe when you read something, you immediately connect with that writer's voice. And when you don't connect with that writer's voice, those words weren't meant for you. You're never, no matter, because I see it on Goodreads. People go, "Oh, I read through the whole book. Everybody's saying it's great, but it's awful." I like went through it, I dragged through it, and I just tried to understand it. But honestly, that's not how literature works. It either connects with you or it doesn't. It either speaks to your heart or it doesn't. So for me, I never say, "Oh, this is a bad writer," or "This book's terrible." When people ask me, "Have you read it?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I've read it." And they said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Oh, I think you should read it, give it a try, and see what you think." I never say, "Oh, I didn't like that story," or this or that. I just say, "You got to try it for yourself." I think everybody has their voice that they're connected to. And so that's just how I see it, I view it. But yeah, I think the strange part is I really hated I really did not like Fahrenheit with Ray Bradbury when I was younger. I just did not care for that book. And I was, I was sort of obsessed with Faulkner, in high school. And I don't know, for some reason I just didn't connect to me. reading Ray Bradbury now, I'm like, I love Fahrenheit. I love that book. I love the lyrical prose. I love all of the things that he did, but I didn't connect to it at that time. And I think every story has their time and place in your life. And so when I always like to revisit stories that I absolutely adore, and then I'm like, yeah, that was good, but I don't know if I like it as much anymore. Just maybe because of growing older and being more mature, and I'm not sure. We just change. We're in constant change. As humans, we change, and we change our views, and we change our perspectives on everything. So, if you hate a book today, you might love it in 10 years from now. So I guess my point is, I'm not so quick to tear down a book or a writer. I'm more like, maybe I'll maybe I'll like it in 10 years from now. That's how I think of it. So,
That's a good perspective to have. So, for our wordsmith listeners who are dating in 2026, what are some red flags that a person's attachment style might be a mismatch for a writer's life?
oh, gosh, that is a really good question. And that is, I would say that our world, well, in Stardust Angel, she does talk about red flags, and she says, I'm so sick of red flags. She's like, the whole world is covered in red flags. And I think we have a lot of red flags. And so I think I'm I'm a champion for humans, so I'm always gonna go the human side, and I'm always willing to give people a shot. So I guess I'm not the right person to ask that question, because I would give them a shot personally, just because, if it bites you in the butt, I accept it. I'm like, okay, fair, fair. But I'm always going to bet on humans. So I'm always going to bet on giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. So I don't know. I'm not so keen on the red flags myself. And I kind of touched on it in Stardust Angel, because she's funny. She kills her parents. I know that's not funny, um, but she talks about this, and she's a teenager, and she talks about living in this world that we live in, and it sort of mirrors this. But yeah, I'm not a red flags person per se. Not to say that people don't have red flags, but I'm not that person. So,
Well, that is pretty interesting. So the next question I have for you is, how do you help readers differentiate from between a soul bond and a bond in your plots?
oh, I think they're sort of one and the same. I think, um I think everything starts with the soul. I think we're spiritual beings. So, I that's what I strongly believe. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And so, I think soul searching and that soul trauma is probably the first step. And it sort of allows you, when you get in touch with the inner self, that inner voice that is inside of you, and you can accept that voice within you, I think the other part sort of falls in line. So I think you really have to do that, not to be cheesy or sound cheesy, but soul searching, but soul bond searching or soul trauma searching, But I think that is really the key, is what's within you, speak your truth. What is that truth? How does that truth feel? What is that trauma? How did that make you feel? We don't, in life, and we don't always have the best listeners by our sides, or the best support groups, or people that are support. And it's really tough, because I've been very close with people in my life, and we've come at odds, especially going through different types of trauma and things. And sometimes your trauma path is something totally different than somebody else's or their experience. And so sometimes the best place to be is um, within yourself, knowing that truth. Sometimes you need to erase the noise around you in order to connect with that trauma and sort of release it. But yeah, I believe it comes from the soul, the inner part, and then the rest works its way through. So I think accepting that and allowing yourself to feel those things is really important. Yeah, and I think that is the journey towards surviving and healing those deeply seated um, trauma. Yeah. So
So, finally, JS, if there is one daily practice our listeners can start tonight to see the world with more strange wonder, what would that be?
well, I all I can say is read everything you can get your hands on and write your ass off. So that's it. You'll learn a lot from reading. If you don't like reading, that's gonna be really. I'm not saying that there's writers out there who hate to read and write great books. I mean, maybe. I'm I mean, maybe they do. I don't know. But for me, there's so many books that there's some I have because we have a joke in my house of like if something happened to you, what would be the things that you would take? And I would take a whole library. I couldn't just choose one book. It's like choosing between your children. Like, do you have a favorite? Some people have favorite children, but anyways, I would have to have a whole library because I just thought, well, I can't be without this because there's books that I've read, oh, 50, 60 times. I'm just, so in love with the book. And so for me as a writer, because I love writing as an art form, and that's what it is. It is like music. It's like you're composing music because you're laying down the words in a rhythmic way. And so reading other people's work and you falling in love with other writers' prose and their voice and the way that they're so economic with their words and things like that will teach you how to become a better writer. But also, you have to do the work. You have to write your ass off. That 10,000, I don't know if you ever heard of the 10,000 rule, but that is really true. I counted my own writing, and to date, I've written about 22,000 hours. So I'm not regimented. I don't like wake up every morning and go, I have to get in X amount of words for my day. That's not really how it works for me. But if you've written so much, it just comes naturally. Like for me, the moment I open up my computer and I start writing, I just write. I mean, I'm just able to do it, but it's that repetition, it's that reflex, it's the things that I built over 22,000 hours that I'm just writing. Everything's in my head and I'm just going. So, yeah, I think the only thing a true writer when I was taking a creative writing class in college, um, I was really struggling because I couldn't afford to keep going to college, and the only thing I really loved doing was writing. I took all the creative writing classes I could, and I talked to my professor, my creative writing professor, and I said, "I'm really struggling. I'm broke. I can't afford to keep going to school. What would you recommend?" And he said, "For you," he's like, he told me that. That's what he said. You need to write and you need to read everything you get your hands on. You need to find your voice. And, I had a lot of encouragement at a very young age to write. I had a mom who loved literature, who was educated herself, put herself through college, and she always instilled that with us. We didn't have a TV growing up. We didn't have any. I mean, I grew up sort of creating these stories and reading books and stuff, and we didn't have a TV to watch. And so I think we got our a TV when I was like 17. And it was, I went to the movies from time to time. We were able to go to the movies sometimes, like maybe once a year or something like that. But or if I was at a friend's house, I'd get to watch their movies. I like to hang out at friends' houses because they had a TV. But when I was 17, we finally got a TV, and I started watching like I didn't even know, like, I never even seen the Twilight Zone, the black and white Twilight Zone, and, what is it? I think it's from I can't remember, some other show like that, and I was just hooked. I thought, "This is the most scariest, bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life, and I love it." And so, I was sort of addicted to that idea of storytelling. I was just because the Twilight Zone has fascinating moral tales within these sort of alternate dimensions and things like that, but there's always a fable woven within those stories. So, yeah, I could go on and on, but yeah.
Well, JS, we have really enjoyed you, so thank you for bringing a little more wonder to our table today.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you here right back here around the table with the AOTR in 2 weeks on Wednesday night. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.